Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Um, we should say something about what we're doing here, shouldn't we, really?
I think so. Yeah. You want to start? Do you want to go ahead?
I don't mind. Yeah. I'll be polite. Yeah. Okay. Well, we first started talking about this, just kind of having conversations, didn't we, about mindfulness generally, and there's both teachers of mindfulness and trainers and practitioners, and in a way, there's so much brilliant stuff out there online about what mindfulness is, what it isn't, and people with great specialisms in areas where they're teaching it with particular contexts and how it applies to all kinds of themes and everybody is saying it, and it's never been a more important time to be practicing mindfulness. But often what they don't do is just get down to the dirty details.
Mm.
So we talked about calling this getting down and dirty with mindfulness, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yes. But it's not an X-rated mindfulness.
It's not X-rated mindfulness. Anybody can listen. And it
Yeah.
could be for people who've never done any. It could be for people who've done lots. It could be for people who teach it. Yeah. So I guess where should we start this week? What should we do?
Yeah. I think we had talked about an interesting question, and I think maybe I can propose that question, which was if you knew what you know now about mindfulness when you started, what would you change or tell yourself or do different?
Not take it so seriously. And by that, I don't mean it's not important, because it's become a really important part of my life. But maybe just not allow it to become another thing to judge yourself by. So, if you don't manage to do the practices you've been asked to do, because of this whole thing that you do between sessions, going off and doing some practices. If I forget to do it, or if I just don't feel like doing it, it's not a good reason to beat myself up about it. It's okay. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting, and therefore you shouldn't worry too much about doing the practice. It's really, the evidence is there about its benefits, right?
Yeah.
But if it's allowed to become something that makes you even worse than you felt to begin with, it's time to rethink what you're doing and how you do it. It's how, isn't it? It's the how of the mindfulness practice. How, with what attitude do you go into it? Is it like, well, I've got to sit here for half an hour and not move, and at the end of it, I better be feeling really, really good about myself, and automatically it becomes something that just makes you feel quite bad about yourself, because that doesn't happen. So I think that's it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think, it's funny because we think we kind of forget that this is just another thing that if our minds are getting critical, they're going to also include in our repertoire of critical thoughts, and
Yeah.
that it's easy to slip into that, and that it works. Mindfulness will work whether you're being critical about yourself or not. And so you might as well have fun with it and relax and enjoy yourself, right?
Yeah.
Versus make it another like to do.
Yeah. 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 And I think part of that, what allows that to happen is almost a sense of, well, we talked about it quite a lot, haven't we? Curiosity. So the mind is wondering, where's it gone? Wow, it's gone here.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Come on back. Thank you for whatever you're doing there. Maybe trying to fix something or make me feel safer, but it's not working. So can you come back, please?
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, my mind has wandered again.
Yeah.
That's no good at mindfulness.
Maybe we could do that with when we're not practicing, like, oh, I've wandered again. I can come
Yeah.
back to the seed.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? If you knew when you started practicing mindfulness what you know now,
Oh,
what would you do differently?
yeah. Well, the first thing I would do is like start earlier in my life. I feel like I started very late. Um, and then I think something that I learned in a class was, and I share this a lot, which is that this is a lifelong practice. And the minute I learned that, I was like, oh my goodness, kind of to what you're saying, it took a lot of pressure off of me to like, oh, you have to do this in these 8 weeks, right? You have to finish you have to be mindful in 8 weeks, and you have to, your life should be different now. And so I think, also the shoulds that come up around when you've practiced for a while and how you're supposed to be as a human being, or especially if you're a mindfulness teacher, and
Yeah.
how, I think I'm coming around that other end of things where I'm actually embracing even the things that I once was not proud of as part of just being a human being. And whether I practice mindfulness or not, I'm still a human being, and that
Yeah.
I can do both. I guess that's the message. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really helpful. And I think it's that the whole practice thing. I always find it takes time for it to become part of just what you do, doesn't it? I think that's one of the hardest things. And people see it as something extra when they're already incredibly busy and potentially exhausted and so on.
Yeah.
And I often think, well, I quite happily manage to clean my teeth, wash my face, feed my dog. And I don't wake up that morning and go, oh my God, I've got to brush my teeth, clean my face, feet. It's just part of what you do. But it takes time, isn't it, to kind of get that. It is a habit.
It's a habit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like when you learn an instrument, there's a little while where you're kind of not knowing what the heck you're doing. And so you have to kind of be patient through that. And that it's also very gracious, and that it eventually it'll all sink in. Kind of like, also kind of like when you learn a language, you're like, get to the point where you're like, I don't know if I'm speaking correctly or what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I understood all of that. And
Yeah.
it's like that patience that we always talk about, right? To let things kind of
Yeah.
happen at their own pace, and then not letting that be deterrent to sitting and doing your practice.
Mm. And I think that's an act of trust, isn't it? Just trusting in the program, trusting that it does work. It works in different ways for different people. So don't measure your own experience against other people's, you know. And it was interesting you talked about kind of musical instruments and learning languages. I think that's a really helpful metaphor, especially when you're starting out doing mindfulness and you're doing what feel like the equivalent of scales and arpeggios. If you've learned music and you're plodding through what are actually quite boring exercises and reciting your verbs and your
Yeah.
cases and so on, and actually understanding that is all part of what you need to go on and do the stuff that then allows you to navigate life's ups and downs. And actually, even the early stuff, you're already learning really important things about how your mind works, our relationship with, the autopilot, all that stuff, right from the beginning. But it's only kind of a bit later on in the course you go, oh, that's why we've been doing this.
Yeah.
So kind of an act of faith, an act of trust, just to keep going and not expecting to see immediate results. You won't suddenly become supremely serene and never worry again in your life and look incredibly attractive to other people and all that other stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're bringing in a good point too, like about just like it's a learning process, and that really demystifies it as well. It's not like you meditate and then something mystical happens to you. It's you're training your mind, and that like you're saying, that takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also people often say that other people around you notice a change before you do.
Yeah.
You regularly hear people saying, my daughter said, what are you doing at the moment? And I thought, what do you mean? I said, I don't need you're different. You're different somehow. It's often around just not being quite so reactive or actually really listening to somebody when they're talking to you, showing up for them. Yeah. That was definitely my experience when I started. What about you?
Yeah, I think, it was something similar. I think I noticed a lot of difference in the way that I was perceiving other people, and maybe people who at one point in my life were tumultuous or difficult. I think the social aspect for me was quite noticeable at first.
Mm.
I think they also noticed, but um, in my experience, I remember like really going, wow, I just got out of that situation and I didn't crumble or I didn't get totally, thrown off or, um, and that doesn't mean that 2 weeks or 2 years later, I didn't get thrown off. There's always
Yeah.
there's always a time where it's something else happens and that throws you off. But it's that growth of like realize like I think it for me it was like the dawning of like, oh, you have choices, not just the one you've been doing all this time, which is that automatic, maybe anxiety or automatic reactivity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really important word in all of this. Choice. Recognizing that you have choices that you didn't even realize were there.
Yeah.
Um, and that can be really transformative, can't it? Because so much of our lives we're just going through the motions. Everything is habits. And that means everything is more likely to result in you being very reactive around stuff that's not so comfortable. And then what follows is, frustration, shame, guilt, blame, all those things that our mind will start getting busy with. And just how much of our lives we spend doing that, actually. If I sat down and noted every time during a day I noticed reactivity, probably get nothing else done because I'm doing it all the time. But also then going, oh, hang on a minute, let's pause.
Yeah.
Is there a choice here?
Yeah, that space that actually allows you to choose that you didn't maybe have before, right? That when you weren't aware. Being aware can be kind of a pain sometimes, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, that again, that again.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, without that, it was still that again. It's just it would, at least in my case, would take me over, and it's
Hmm.
different now. It's that again, but it's I see you.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get down and dirty.
Okay.
Things that are difficult about mindfulness.
Oh, yeah, good question. There's a lot difficult. I think that the I mean, and I don't want to discourage people, but we're getting down and dirty, right? So,
Yeah.
um, for me, I think the most difficult thing was when I had to really look at things that I am ashamed of or I felt ashamed of. Like,
Yeah.
I'll just go right to the core.
Yeah.
Um, I share a story sometimes in my classes. If I can share it here, I'll try to be brief. But I just remember in one of my first silent retreats, it's not silent. It's silent outside, but it's not silent inside.
Very noisy inside, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, making a cup of tea at one of the, breakfast, nobody's really talking, but everybody's there, and I was making this cup of tea that I was, kind of when you're in silence, little things become very big things, like, "Oh, how delicious this tea is gonna be," and I was putting cinnamon in it. I was all excited about this lovely cup of tea, and then my mind went to, like, I'm sure those people over there are looking at me make this tea and they're like wishing they had one, or I don't, something to that sort of like something about them observing me make the tea and how that was reflecting on me or some bizarre thought. And I remember just bursting out crying because I was so embarrassed of myself to think you are so concerned about everybody else and what everybody else is thinking of you and how everybody else is looking at you. And I, had a little bit of that for me was difficult, right? It was difficult to look at that. Now, I'm so grateful that I did because it's, doesn't mean I never worry about what other people think of me, but at the same time, it's gotten a lot smaller. It's become a little small,
Mm.
pocket-sized, voice.
So can I just ask, when you noticed that and you were crying, what happened after that? What happened next?
I went to talk to my teacher and ask him
Um,
about what was going on because I really didn't understand it. Yeah.
And what did
And
they say?
well, he said sometimes, this happens and sometimes these things don't go away, which actually did not feel very encouraging to me at the time. But I think I understand what he meant now, is that sometimes the voices are going to pop in because that's the mind's habit. But something did go away, which was its grip on me, I think, and over time, I think, I still catch myself in these things and many other things. It's just, I guess that this is the reward of the practice, is that like now when I catch myself, I know what it is, and it doesn't sneak up on me. It doesn't hijack me. It doesn't debilitate me. It doesn't turn into dysfunction in my mind, or in, not being able to do the next thing I was going to do, or, um, so I think it's a lot different when you practice mindfulness. But so the down and dirty piece is you kind of have to go through some of these moments where you're not happy with what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe that's just my experience. So I don't know. I don't know. How about you? What's your down and dirty?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a really powerful message and experience that you went through. And, yeah, I don't want to make it sound like mindfulness is full of distress and
Right.
difficulty, but stuff comes up. But that comes up even when you're not practicing mindfulness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that voice was heckling me for a long time. I mean, it was really not giving me quality of life. And so not looking at it wasn't helping either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's something that can be a real revelation if you're practicing, is like, this doesn't have to affect me this way. Not this won't happen anymore, but
Right.
it will happen. And actually that's okay. And I now know what I can do to support myself in those moments.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So we're not pushing stuff away. We're not trying to stop things happening, because what we're, those experiences are part of who we are, aren't they? And they've come from all kinds of complex things going on through your lifetime and your experiences. And so kind of embracing that, but also doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. It comes back to what you said about choices, because now if those thoughts come in my mind, I have choices. I can challenge the thought, right? I don't have to let it sit there and fester. I can say, that's great, but really, is that where you want to focus your attention? Or what, you can work with it. And that's the choice, I think, that you were referring to at the beginning.
Completely. Yeah. Noticing, pausing, noticing there may be a choice. Yeah. Even if that choice ends up being the thing you were going to do anyway, the difference between it being a reaction and being a choice is quite profound.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to down and dirty.
Okay.
I suppose the most challenging thing for me was realizing how much of my life I spent on autopilot, and actually being really ashamed of that. Again, I don't want to tell you a very long story, but I remember when my children were little, so 3 and 6. I might have told you this before. And I was working full time, getting up, being a perfect mother, being a perfect colleague, and was getting up at about 5 a.m., packing my children's lunch in their boxes ready for school, kindergarten, and cycling 45 minutes to work, getting at my desk for 7 a.m., working through the day without lunch, leaving at about 6 p.m., cycling home, getting back just in time to give my children some dinner, give them a bath, read them a bedtime story. And there was one day when I was reading the bedtime story thinking, oh, God, I'm so good at this. This is great. I'm just doing everything really well. And my son said, Mummy, why does that duck say that? And I said, what duck? And he looked at me and said, the duck in the book. And I looked at the book and it was called The Naughty Duck. And I thought, I was reading on autopilot. I wasn't even aware of what the story was because my mind was at work.
Yeah.
And I thought, how much of my life and my children's lives so far have I actually been here for? And I realized it was very little. And then I thought, well, at least I'm supporting my colleagues at work and trying to compensate for the fact that I was doing this. I went to a colleague and he said, do you feel supported by me? Am I doing a good job? And he paused for a bit too long and said, you are setting a standard of perfection that none of us feel we can reach. and we don't feel that we can share anything with you that we're worried about because we think that will be a sign of failure.
Mm.
And I thought, whoa, I really need to do something differently here. And of course, then I realized that all the physical symptoms I was experiencing, hair was starting to fall out, the paper cuts were getting infected, horrible stuff, was a sign of overwhelm and probably burnout. So I'd been practicing mindfulness for a long time, but was being so perfect that I'd left it behind and thought, I'm going to go back to it. And it took about 3 weeks. And then one day I was reading a bedtime story and he said, I like mindfulness. And I said, are you doing some at school? And he said, no, but you are.
Wow. Then from out the bay to
from the wisdom of the mouth of babes. So yeah, that was a kind of shocking moment for me. And it was hard. It was hard to acknowledge and let go of this idea that being the perfect anything involved you not being present for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't tasting the food I was eating. I wasn't have a cup of coffee that I'd been looking forward to all morning and then turn around and it was empty. And I was like, who drank my coffee? And realized I had. And not being present for my children's childhood. That was really hard, actually.
Yeah.
Realization. Yeah.
But if I may guess, but I know this is me guessing, but my best guess is that it was all coming from a place of wanting to show up in the best way for everybody.
Ironically. Yeah, completely. I wanted to be everything to everyone. And actually I was being nothing to anyone. It's sort of, yeah. Yeah. And what I had to work really hard at was what I think lots of people struggle with, which is I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
But maybe that's another discussion we can have.
Mm-hmm.
The barriers to doing the practice. And I don't have time for this is one that you've really got to work on.
Yeah.
Because you do. Because actually,
Not to do it.
if you don't, you lose time. You lose time with your loved ones. You lose time to really listen to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying, thank you also for sharing that. That's really generous to share. And it's interesting what you're saying about time and how, what is time really? It's like this kind of time space thing or this attention time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting how it changes. People regularly say, since I've been putting the time in to do mindfulness practice, there's been more time in my day. And that's because you're there, you're showing up for it rather than the mind. How the mind can just take you away and, 5, 10, 30, 60 minutes later, you go, hang on a minute. And it's like you've just woken up, whether you've just been ruminating or scrolling, or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. And you don't even remember where you were.
No.
Yeah.
No. So.
Wow.
We've covered a lot, haven't we?
Yeah. Yeah. I had one question if you feel like answering, but I'm just wondering like what helped you transition back to maybe like I'm hearing some self-compassion in there. So I'm just wondering if that is how you worked with all of that.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think it was listening to the mind of saying you don't have time for this. And initially it wasn't about me. I said, this time is for my children. I'm giving this gift of time so that I can be more present with my children. And then it was, and actually I'm also doing this to support my colleagues. And then right at the end of it, and actually it's probably quite good for me too. They're always in that order,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was almost, literally a gift to other people to be doing that practice. And it was interesting to see how things like meetings changed, because I'd go into a meeting kind of prepared for all the difficult stuff that was going to come up, and I'd rehearsed what I was going to say, and it always ended up in people just being disappointed or me feeling really bad about myself because I hadn't handled it very well. And then practicing mindfulness and things like, just being present when you're speaking and listening. Everybody changed in the meetings. Everybody changed, It was softer. People just were heard when they were speaking rather than being interrupted with a solution or an answer. And they just went away happy.
Wow.
Wanted you to hear me. It's like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going into fix it mode or something.
Yeah. And the conscious leadership that I'm hearing, which has transitioned the way that meeting went,
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, a major part of what people need, whether they're having formal meetings or any conversation, is just to be heard. They don't necessarily even need advice or a solution. They just want to be heard. But that hearing has to be genuine, authentic hearing, really being present for what they're saying. And there's like something magic that then can happen in terms of the relationship, in terms of how they feel, how you feel. I started to look forward to meetings. How weird is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which says a lot for many of our ability to be present, for all longing to be heard, right? Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So hopefully getting a bit down and dirty has also brought, and this is why you do it, even if it feels like you don't have time.
Yeah.
It's boring or I've got other priorities.
Yeah.
Well worth doing. And it can be fun. We've focused on the tough stuff, haven't we, today? But
Yeah.
maybe we do something about the fun.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, the way we tend to present it in the classes is, this time for you. And what you're describing is not just time for you, it's time for everybody around you.
Yeah.
That yeah, and it's maybe going back to one of the first questions, which was like, what would you tell yourself? The other thing for me, which is related to this and what helps me practice too, is that I have so much more agency in my life than I thought. Where I was outwardly like hoping someone would help me or fix it and then when I discovered this practice, I realized like I can do a lot on my own. And that's really motivated me to, I guess that's the joy of the practice in a way of that regaining that agency.
Yes. Really empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah. And instead of sitting around and waiting for something to happen to make you feel better,
Right.
it's in here.
Yeah. And it's a radical act of accountability and responsibility. Like you took that accountability to say, I'm going to do this for myself and for everyone around me. Right? I mean, like that's a radical act of the responsibility which comes with the agency, right? They come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it starts with it being about someone else rather than yourself.
Yeah.
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 And it's not selfish. That's one of the common things people think, isn't it? It's a bit selfish taking time for yourself. On retreat as if that's some kind of spa experience. It's not.
Just make yourself a cup of tea and you'll see.
You're making yourself a cup of tea and then crying. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard work, but it's like good hard work.
Yeah.
I think.
Absolutely. Good hard
Not
work.
create any expectation.
Feels good once you've done it. Not always while you're doing it, once you've done it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then actually, I think we should also do a conversation about our delights in practice that we've discussed. Maybe we'll do.
Let's do that. We'll make that another gathering.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Awesome.
Good idea. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we hope this is helpful for whoever's listening and it's helpful for us to talk. And I think, I don't know about you, Claire, but I just feel like there's a lot of things I want to share out there and not from a place of me knowing more but just a lot of things that come up. I think we were talking about in our classes and that we just feel like could be talked about. And so, I'm also glad to hear other people's opinions about these things.
Yeah. Anything that people have observed, we're not the authorities here. We've just been there along with lots of other people.
Yeah.
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 Great.
Awesome.
Well,
Till next time. I